Hola, Joe, muy buenos días. Gracias por conectar con Edu News. Un placer enorme tenerte en este espacio dedicado a la educación y la cultura, junto con Claudia Muiño, que nos acompaña también para dialogar sobre algo que es muy importante en este momento para nosotros en Argentina, que es el cambio de enfoque en la educación, la incorporación de la inteligencia artificial. Y primero déjame que te presente, ¿no? Para los que nos van a estar escuchando, John es docente e investigador de la Universidad de Minnesota, fundador de Education Futures LLC, creador del concepto Knowmad y escritor de varios libros, entre ellos el Manifiesto 15 y Aprendizaje Invisible. A partir de este concepto, nos gustaría que nos cuentes cuál es la idea de ser un Knowmad hoy en este contexto mundial para la educación.
No, primero, muchas gracias por la invitación para hablar con vos. So a nomad, it's like a nomad of knowledge. So I'm taking Peter Drucker's concept of a knowledge worker, but turning into or knowledge work and then turning to knowledge worker. And so a nomad is a worker who is creative, somebody who's adaptable, and somebody who thrives in nonlinear environments. So unlike traditional employees where you show up every day, do the same job in and out, nomads just don't carry skills, but they are really focused on creating new value, right? And this is by taking their personal knowledge to connect ideas across disciplines, cultures, and using technologies in smart ways. And this concept, I think, is especially relevant in education because schools aren't preparing for nomadic work, right? They're preparing students for jobs that already exist, but we really need to focus on the ones that haven't yet been invented. And to be successful, having more of a nomadic profile, I think you have more of the skills to be able to succeed in a future that is not yet defined on this. So I think within education that the real challenge is to figure out how we can nurture learners who can keep reinventing themselves in their communities.
Okay, thank you. Después te explico, Ale, porque no sé si se va a tomar mucho tiempo, ¿no?
Pero en breve, si querés
En
contar.
breve lo que dijo es que, bueno, para él este concepto en relación con educación, Knowmad, es esa persona que, digamos, busca no como superarse y también encontrar otras habilidades en su trabajo cotidiano y que no sea, digamos, esas habilidades antiguas para las que fuimos, digamos, confeccionados para cumplir con ciertas tareas, sino que acá se busca otro tipo de habilidades, también pensando en trabajos que aún no están inventados, ¿no? O creados. Por eso él dice jobs that have not been invented yet. O sea, es súper interesante, pero ¿cómo hacemos que eso encaje con la realidad, digamos, educativa, ¿no? De hoy en día en el mundo. No sé si querés seguir con ese tema o si le preguntamos acerca de lo otro que le habías mandado.
Sí, vos hacés referencia al concepto de nomads como habilidad porque prosperan, ¿no? En la ambigüedad. Me interesaría que cuentes a qué te referís con eso, ¿no? Es decir, lo pensás como navegar en aguas complejas, ¿no? En esto de no quedarse en la comodidad, sino que buscar nuevos desafíos, como creo que vos también mencionabas, nuevas herramientas, habilidades. Pero lo interesante del concepto es esto. Creo que tiene que ver con ir en busca de algo más que de lo establecido. ¿Cómo trabajar eso en las aulas? ¿No? Por eso este concepto tan interesante. Y además, la adaptación a diferentes grupos de trabajo, a diferentes ámbitos, que creo que también es preparar a los estudiantes para el futuro laboral.
So you're wondering how the classroom works differently.
Okay.
Dale. Well, so the classroom that we have, and we keep reinventing it. And one of the problems that we have today is that it's the same people always reinventing the same things, including when new technologies come in. It used to be like tablets were in the classroom, and so the same people we're talking about books in the classroom, talking about tablets. Now it's artificial intelligence, and we need to get out of this, because what we're doing is we're propagating this sort of industrial classroom that's rooted in our 19th century factory model. So, this 19th century model where you got students sitting in rows, right? They follow a standardized curricula, and they're really measured for compliance and efficiency. And they're very authoritarian in how they're run.
Yeah.
I mean, it's modeled after the Catholic Church of all things. And I think that in terms of getting people up to speed, or masses of people up to speed for the industrial age, but it's out of step with today's world, which is not so much focused on heavy industry anymore. The idea is that we need to engage in more co-creation, or co-managed classrooms, co-everything, right? To really flip this logic around. Because the whole structure we have today, it's focused on control, fear, compliance, where students don't have much agency, which is being allowed to do what they want to do in their learning careers. Teachers have the same problem. Teachers don't have agency to be able to teach what they want to teach. And at the same time, we have self-efficacy, autoefficacia, right? Which is like believing in ourselves to be able to do what we want to do despite our learning, right? And the same goes with teachers. So in classrooms where I think that teachers are empowered and students are empowered to co-create their learning journeys, they set goals together, they decide on projects, they negotiate responsibilities together.
Yeah.
And this doesn't mean a loss of structure. Like, I visited many democratic schools, and they have much more structure than in rules than in a normal school. But it really means a gain in relevance and ownership. And I would say most importantly, responsibility, right? Because responsibility on the learner is to the learners themselves, or the teachers and the learners. It's not to a spreadsheet that goes to a government minister or secretary, right? I guess the bottom line is that when students are treated as partners in learning, they don't just absorb knowledge or get into this sort of information, but they actually practice learning, and also the cultural values that we want to create in the classroom, such as democracy.
Based on what you have just said, what would be for you, what's your idea of the role of the teachers then? You said co-creators or co-designers of the curriculum, but in the classroom itself, because kids come with, many demands, many different needs, many expectations, and many inquiries about the world that surrounds them. So how can we fulfill all that from the position of an educator?
Much of the debate out there has been, do we view teachers as the sages on the stage or the guides on the sides? And but I think the real answer is really reinventing the role of the teacher, reinventing the structure of the school. Because teachers aren't prepared for the future as much as anybody else. We don't know if teachers are going to have jobs in 2 years, right? Because things are changing so fast. And so how can they teach about the future and future jobs if we're not sure about places for them as well? So I think that there's a real opportunity into kind of creating these co-creative spaces, co-learning spaces where teachers are learning as well, other members of the community, intergenerational learning, interage learning. There's a lot of things that kids can teach adults, as well as vice versa. And I think that what we need to do more in schools is create opportunities for students to experiment, to play, discover things, and even if it risks failure, right? Okay. So it's okay to fail, and the role of the teacher is to help the students, do their job next time, or the students together do their jobs next time. And the role of the system is not to create failures, right? But failing is a natural part of how we work.
Vos recién traducía, Claudia, y decía lo de reinventarnos. Pensaba en esto que también escuché que vos mencionabas en otra entrevista, de aprender y desaprender. Esto también va vinculado a los profes y también a los alumnos, o sea, a los dos actores, ¿no? Dentro de lo que es la enseñanza y, por supuesto, directivos, ¿no? Y funcionarios. Serían como 4 partes, pero se trata de eso, de reinventarse para poder aprender y desaprender constantemente, ¿no?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, that's super important. And we wrote about that a lot in Aprendizaje Invisible over a decade ago. Unlearning, relearning as we go along, because knowledge isn't static, or information doesn't remain static. But I think that also with this is that we need to move away from being consumers of information, consumers of what to do, because the challenges that we face today require really bold action on all of us, right? We've got real world challenges that we could really focus our curricula on, right? Because right now, too often we're focused on consecutive units that create a sort of illusion of progress, but but life doesn't quite unfold chapter by chapter like that, right? The world is messy, it's interconnected. We're dealing with climate change, we're dealing with inequality, disruptions by artificial intelligence. And what we do in schools and education really needs to mirror that complexity. Otherwise, we will never be able to solve these things. We're not going to create students or as outputs that can solve these grand challenges, because they're just asking for the answers. So within schools, I mean, in addition, this is getting back to the learning and unlearning point, because when we have authentic problems that are both local or global, we can prepare them to think critically, we can collaborate, we can innovate. And these sort of real world challenges cut across disciplines and really force students to connect knowledge with action, right? And this kind of education builds not just competencies, but also a sense of agency and responsibility and a self-efficacy that I was talking about. And I think that a huge part of this, and I'm writing a new book that's related to Manifesto 25. It's going to come out in a few weeks. One of the key messages we get in there is that we can't rely on hope or hope alone, because hope puts us in this sort of passive mode. And I ran across an old quote from Nietzsche recently, or reran across it. And I don't agree with Nietzsche very much, because he's very nihilistic and has kind of dark view of humanity. But he had a quote on hope that I thought was really interesting, because it goes back to deeper philosophical debates. And he was relating it to the story of Pandora's box, where all the evils of the world were released except for hope. Because that is the worst evil, because it only prolongs man's torment. And I thought, damn, that's dark. But it's also true. So we can't rely on hope. We can't rely on external things to tell us what to do or how to do things, or act as consumers for these grand solutions. But rather, we have to take action. And that's a very important thing.
All right. Okay. Ali's back. He had a problem with electricity.
Oh, I'm sorry, you dropped off. I didn't even notice. Sorry, I was talking too much. My head was wherever. Yeah.
And maybe I would like now, I don't know, Ale, if you tenés otra pregunta que le gustaría hacer, si no, en base a esto que estaba diciendo, yo puedo...
Sí, continúa.
So, now, you said that we have to take action, that we have to stop being consumers. That's harsh, because we are in a, I mean, capitalism is there, and it is very, difficult to avoid it. I mean, that's like how the world works, right?
I want you to buy my book, consume it, but I also want you to create your own book.
Okay.
Or take my book, rip it apart, and make it your own. Put in stuff that makes sense.
I don't know if to rip it apart, but of course to make the most of it. You said that we should be less consumers, but now I'm thinking about teens and kids and all this huge world, which is technology and AI, and they are being constantly bombarded with the stimulus from technology and AI. And how can we make those two friends, let's say, be like on our side when we are in the classroom? Because sometimes teachers feel that those are monsters, and we should battle them. And but at the same time, we know that they use it, that they go and check, that they go and ask questions, that they go and, play. And so it's like, we feel like it's a little bit unfair because technology grows so fast and we don't grow maybe that fast. So what about us? What about our knowledge? What about what we have to say in the classroom? So my question would be, how can we raise awareness maybe, or make them be much more, like reasonable in the ways how they can use technology and AI?
Yeah, so 100 years ago, we have been talking about this new technology called books,
Yeah,
and how books made people angry because these are words that look really smart that challenge the absolute authority of the nun teaching at the front of the classroom, right?
true.
And so people were fighting books. Then people are fighting laptops and then tablets and cell phones. And now today it's artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
The difference being is that we all know artificial intelligence is going to become much more disruptive. And so it's not going to go away, right?
no,
And I think that's the challenge that many teachers and schools have is that they're discovering that they can't compete with it in many ways, which is a problem thinking and action because they're not finding ways to create value beyond artificial intelligence or doing things. And I kind of mentioned, I think earlier in this chat, maybe is a little bit sarcastic, in my tone, but it's the same people who were complaining about and telling and guiding us through laptops. They're doing the same for artificial intelligence. And the challenge is that we're facing these new technologies, new possibilities with old ideas and old perspectives. And I see this in so many reports. I read a lot of research, many documents. I ran across one the other day. I'm not going to mention the institution because I happen to work for them. But they have this report on artificial intelligence, and you're not supposed to judge a book by the cover.
yeah,
But this had an industrial classroom, students sitting in rows. And at the front, there's artificial intelligence. And do you know what it did in this image? It was changing the color of the walls from yellow to blue.
oh,
And that was, whoa. So it's like, how do you use artificial intelligence and not change anything, right? And so we need to get out of that mindset. We need to get new people in the conversations.
oh,
But also as educators, we need to inject ourselves into the conversation a lot more with a much more innovation focus. I don't think that, at least with today's technologies, I don't think it makes sense to have artificial intelligence run schools or run education programs because it's not intelligent, right? It's just an algorithm that goes on like random walks kind of and creates answers that look plausible, but we're not there yet technology wise. Maybe in a couple of years we will be. And so these are things we need to think about, but
yeah,
we also need to think about more on how we use these technologies much more effectively within schools and find ways that we can embrace them. And also find ways how we can kind of disrupt things and make things fun. So I'm working on something now, and it's something I started over a couple of weeks ago. Then I put it aside because I got busy with other stuff, so I'll finish up soon. But the question came to me, well, so what are we going to do about students, cheating using artificial intelligence? I'm like, well, you're probably asking the wrong question. Then I started thinking, well, what if we were to gamify cheating with artificial intelligence? So creating a website, be online in a couple of weeks, probably called trampi.ar. Get it? Trampi.ar. Where you plug in your homework question and it does your homework for you. But then you have to read what the outputs critically to find out how is it broken? What did AI do wrong in answering your question? So you're able to think critically reading these outputs.
So the other way around.
The other way around is become much more critical users of these tools, right? So you're thinking your way through these tools instead of being much more passive.
Yeah.
And I think that within education, we need to start thinking in more ways like that. Start thinking a little more orthogonally, right? To different directions and take on different vectors. How we're approaching things and experiment more. and try to have fun and stop perceiving things as a threat, as something that absolutely needs to be controlled. That's something that we need to limit to just changing the color of the walls. We could do a whole lot more better than that.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard, but I agree.
Yeah.
Like
No sé si
also,
querés hacer como un compendio de lo que él dijo para hacerlo.
sí, que, bueno, porque yo le pregunté qué pasa ahora con todas estas nuevas tecnologías y la inteligencia artificial que está tan al alcance de los chicos y de los adolescentes, cómo podemos, digamos, combatir contra eso que a veces lo sentimos como una amenaza, ¿no? Que encima la inteligencia artificial sabe mucho más que nosotros y es mucho más inmediata, porque el chico ingresa un prompt y ya tiene la respuesta ahí. Que a veces los docentes nos sentimos que no podemos contra eso, que es como un monstruo y
No,
cómo
no
podemos
sabemos o no podemos promptear, que es una de las palabras que se usan ahora, ¿no? Promptear.
copiar. Exactly. Entonces, bueno, él habla que hay que, obviamente, hacer un uso crítico de esa inteligencia artificial, que hace millones de años atrás, cuando aparecieron los libros, fue como una amenaza, también se sintió a que iban a desaparecer entonces las personas más cultas que se encargaban de culturizar y demás, y sin embargo esto no fue así, pero que hay que ir buscando, digamos, las maneras, que no es hacer políticas de parche, ¿entendés? El justo poner
Exactamente.
un ejemplo de, uy, AI, y bueno, y cambió el color de algo, que hay que ir más allá de eso y experimentar. Por eso nos dio esta página, trampy.r, hay que googlearla,
Sí.
que lo que hace es como que te arroja algo erróneo, y entonces el estudiante lo tiene que revisitar, revisar, releer y fijarse qué está mal en eso. O sea, es como el camino inverso, en vez de arrojarte la respuesta correcta, te la arroja con quizás imprecisiones.
Claro, con imprecisión.
Entonces no te queda otra más que double check, you have to double check that somehow, o proofread it. Bueno, no sé si querés cerrar con algo, Ale, o...
Sí, lo que quería preguntarte, vos que tenés tanta experiencia en acompañar, capacitar, y en ese cruce de culturas, ¿qué país crees vos que hoy se pudo correrse de alguna manera de lo que sería el aula industrializada, ese aula vetusta, ¿no? Añeja, tradicional, para decirla de una manera más diplomática, y llegar a ese aula que vos proponés y que tantos docentes proponemos, que es un aula más integradora, más heterogénea, y en donde los alumnos verdaderamente sean parte del aprendizaje, ya no desde un docente que dicta una clase, sino que un docente que guía, que acompaña el momento de adquirir conocimientos y de reconvertirlos, de refundarlos y de aprender también con ellos, ¿no? Y de ellos. ¿En qué parte vos crees que, si podés decirlo, ¿no? A lo mejor es una pregunta muy, muy puntual, pero no sé, de las regiones de Latinoamérica, de los países de Latinoamérica, de Europa o de Estados Unidos mismo?
Somebody at the Ministry of Education in Buenos Aires a few months ago, hey, John, which country is the best prepared for all this? And I was like, you know what, it's probably Finland, but I don't know. So I created a tool actually to help answer that question. So it's Jeffrey, the Global Education Futures Readiness Index. So Jeffrey, GFRI.educationfutures.com. And what it does is it takes indicators that are published by UNESCO and the World Bank and others, and looks at dimensions of infrastructure. We've got human capital, school access and gender parity, innovation, and governance. Try to figure out which one is the best prepared, not who's doing the best right now, but which one is the best prepared for the future, right? And so this list updates every month. So it's always pulling in the latest indicators. And today, you know, as of September 1st, or the indicators are updated, Denmark is looking the most prepared, followed by South Korea, Netherlands, Singapore, and Switzerland. Where I'm at the United States, we're number 16 in the list. Argentina is number 43 in the world. So it's interesting to look through and kind of get some ideas from comparatively how countries are doing. It doesn't have answers as to why really, but it could be used as a launching point for future investigations.
Thank you.
Creo que la verdad que con todo lo que hemos hablado tenemos un un montón de información. Sí, mencionar, John, que para ir de a poquito despidiéndonos, dos cositas. En China están por incorporar la inteligencia artificial, no sé si ya se ha incorporado a partir de este mes en las aulas, y siempre hablamos con Claudia de la incorporación de otras dos, digamos, redes importantísimas para conectar con los chicos, porque eso es importante, conectar con los chicos, llegar a lo que les pasa, a lo que les sucede, que tiene que ver con la educación financiera y también con la educación socioemocional, ¿no? Yo creo que esas son las tres patas importantes hoy a tener en cuenta. La IA, lo emocional, lo socioemocional y también la educación financiera, porque vos tenés hoy alumnos que con el celular tienen acceso a todo. ¿Qué opinás vos o cómo también ves vos esto, no solo en Argentina, sino también en general, ¿no? En otras partes del mundo, si tienen los mismos inconvenientes, los mismos planteos.
I think that you're diving into is going to be a very interesting, interconnected, complex web of issues that are emerging. So we got social emotional learning, which is super important because when I talk about Knowmad skills, they align very much with SEL, right? And so these skills are critical. But then you also tie in, okay, we've got new vectors like China's huge investment in artificial intelligence, especially for education. The interesting thing about AI, at least AI now, and this is largely because it requires large data sets, a lot of it's proprietary, requires a huge amount of electricity to run these things, expensive hardware, a lot of memory. It's not democratized, right? So a very few number of companies control everything in regard to AI right now. And this breaks one of the core tenets of the internet, right? Where everything's supposed to be democratized,
globalized,
globalized, interconnected. Now we connect to them and then we give them money or they're clients. Now the thing about artificial intelligence, because everything is artificial, also on this SEL, social emotional learning side, it's starting to make some connections in with that. So you have to think about whose priorities are creating these sort of SEL things, what sort of values are being installed in there. And one thing that I could share that's probably a bit more innocuous, but I think we see every time we have a conversation with ChatGPT or other tools, is that these tools seem to be training us on how to think about certain things. It's always telling us that we have to make the ethical decisions about using AI, right? Forget that there's only a couple companies controlling the whole thing. They run the ethics show. They decide where the ethics are, but they're saying, no, it's your responsibility. And they're training us to think that way. And that's a really interesting thing when you think about how we approach how we think, our ethical thinking, our social thinking, that these tools could be used to program us. But at the same time, I think we're also starting to see some attempts at democratization. Chile has got a LATAM GPT type thing that they're working on. So I think it's going to get better, but it might not. So we just have to see where these things go and also be very much aware with it. Critically.
All right. And what about financial education? Do you think that's necessary nowadays to have at schools?
Yeah, I think that managing personal finances and understanding changes in the finances, I think are very much important. I think that's one area that we need to focus more on. Is changing our approaches to mathematics education, where we're not focusing so much on calculus and trigonometry, for example, but we teach statistics instead. Because statistics help us understand the world around us much better. And as we're being bombarded by so much information, it helps us digest that information so much more. And so I think having more statistical knowledge and being able to read things, read trends critically, and be able to plot out trajectories, I think is an important skill for students to have.
Bueno, agradecerte enormemente, es un placer, esperemos que esta es la primera, que no sea la última vez en EduNews, porque la verdad que aportás muchísimo valor, conocimiento, y dos cositas te quisiera pedir antes de irnos. algún concepto en español que te animes a dejar, alguna idea.
I would just say, you can say, cuestiona todo.
Muchísimas gracias y
Muchas gracias.
bueno, que sigas muy bien. Saludos a tu esposa argentina, ella.
Thank you.
Muy bien, gracias a ustedes.
A vos, un placer, hasta luego.
Placer.
No, fue un placer.
Bye bye.
Bye.